Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's episode of Intuitive Angling, and appreciate you guys checking out today's episode and spending some of your day with me. Guys, today we're going to be talking about rod actions, and specifically we're going to talk about why you should ignore, every time you get a rod, a lot of times it'll say like medium heavy or extra fast or whatever taper on here. Ignore this, guys. This does not mean anything at all. I'm going to explain why that is in today's video, and I'm going to give you guys some tips and advice on how you can accurately know and assess what the action of a rod is without even looking at anything on the description in a lot more real world applications. So we're going to get into that in today's video. Also, guys, before we get started, a couple quick housekeeping tips to keep the lights on here in the old tackle room. I'd just like to invite everybody to please swing by and check out my Fish of the Moment lake map breakdowns. And we have our winter maps up right now. These are lake map breakdowns that I built specifically for Fish of the Moment. They are great resources, guys, to learn more about your favorite lake or a lake you've never seen before. Get you some good fishing places you can go right to. So I'll put my lake map breakdown link in the description of the video. And also, guys, quick reminder, we're getting into December, time of this video. One of my favorite ways to catch bass in December is on a finesse jig. Here's my Blaukat Throwback finesse jig, my power finesse jig from Cumberland Pro Lures, living rubber, frog hair skirt. Guys, this is a deadly wintertime lure. Put it on 12-pound test line, get you some type of a green or brown combination. We got 6 colors and 3 sizes. Fish this thing on steep rocky banks, ripraps, bluff banks. You guys will catch a bunch of fish on it. So I'll put my throwback jig, my power finesse throwback jig, a link in the description, and my Tackle Warehouse link of this video. If you guys just use and bookmark that link, that's a good way to help the channel out. So thank you very much for me and my family here. Okay, guys, all too common. It's like when people get a rod, they want to know what action is. And I'll tell you one thing about rod videos I do. There's a lot of what I call rod snobs out there, because when I do a video, I talk in terms of like, medium action or, light action or different type of actions. I get these rod snobs that come on there. Randy, you don't know what you're talking about. It's this or that. You have to describe it like this. This is a extra fast taper, and you don't know what taper means, and you don't know what parabolic bend means, and they sound like some physics teacher that's creating or critiquing my work. But I do know I've been bass fishing for over 50 years, and I know what rod actions are, and I know what rod actions you need, and I know the characteristics of every rod. So, if you're some rod snob out there that I don't describe the exact action you think is right, that is meaningless in the real world of fishing. I want to describe to you guys how you can accurately assess a rod action and what that actually means for your fishing. So, first of all, guys, ignore this right here. Absolutely ignore anything you see about the recommended line test that says 12 to 20 pound test line, medium, heavy, fast, whatever. Just like put a piece of tape over it. Here's what you want to know about rod and rod action, because it's a combination of factors together. Number one, it's a combination of the rod length. The rod length in correlation with how stiff of the butt section it is, as far as if you put your hand on your reel and you reach up with your left hand and you bend that butt section. Some rods are stiffer. You can feel a variation in how stiff that is. But the main part of it is the bend of the rod from the tip about 1/3 of the way down. This is the most important aspect to judge what a rod action is. And in my term, this is the way I do it. If I have a rod that bends super easy and super pliable right that, I consider that like, some type of a medium light action rod. If it goes up, if I bend it like that and it's a little bit stiffer like that, but it still has a nice bend in it, that's going to be a medium action rod. If it has not quite as much stiff in it, but I still have, a little bit of bend in it, I consider that a medium heavy rod. And if I bend it like here and it doesn't hardly bend at all, it's like super stiff, I consider that, like an extra, heavy, extra stiff rod. So that is the only thing that you really need to know about it in terms of how you decide what rod is going to be best for which lure category. It all has to do with the combination of your rod length, the tip stiffness, and the butt stiffness. Now, a lot of rods out there, you can't notice a big difference in the stiffness of the butt. A lot of rods, especially modern day rods, maybe not so much before, they all have a fairly stiff overall butt section, the first 1/3 length of it. But the real change is halfway up to the end of the rod. That's where you have your action variation. So here's a couple things you need to remember. First of all, the length of your rod is going to have a lot to do with a couple different things. It's going to have to do a lot to do with your casting distance, your ability to set the hook, and your ability to work a lure. If you're fishing a rod that's over 7 feet long, it's going to be very difficult to impart action on a lure with your wrist because of the length of the rod and the weight of the rod. Therefore, if you fish lures out there where you got to jerk them a lot like that or put action on them like a jerk bait or topwater lure or something like that, you always want a shorter rod, something that's under 7 feet long. If for most fishing out there where you're just casting and reeling like that, usually a rod over 7 feet is going to be the best model because the rod over 7 feet gives you more casting distance. You can take up more line on the hook set. It's just a better tool for controlling the fish. So in correlation with a rod, where I don't care if it's under 7 feet or over 7 feet, the correlation with that length has to do with the butt section here, the stiffness of it, and how the rod tapers on the end. Now, this rod taper from the point of the rod about to the half of the rod here, this is where you need to pay your attention to, big time out there, because it has to do with the lure categories that you're fishing on how this bend occurs. If you're fishing any type of a treble hook lure that has small diameter treble hooks on it, like some type of a small or medium-sized crankbait, maybe some type of a jerk bait, maybe some type of a topwater, like a little popper that's got little, light wire hooks on it, you want some type of a medium to medium light action rod because you don't want those hooks to pull out and you don't need the power. The hook themselves will penetrate with less power because you don't have to generate forward motion to get that hook to penetrate near as much. And therefore, the lighter tip is going to give you better lure manipulation with that. And then if you go up a little bit, say for example, you're fishing, a little, 1.5 inch crankbait on a medium light action rod. Let's say that you go up to a 2-inch crankbait, a little bit bigger crankbait. Or let's say that you put on a little bit bigger jerk bait that's got a little bit bigger hooks on it. At that point, you want a little bit stiffer tip because the stiffer tip or the medium action, something like that, is going to allow those little bit larger diameter treble hooks to penetrate in the fish's mouth. So for the most part, when I'm using any treble hook lure, except the treble hook lures on like maybe like a big 30-foot crankbait or like a big oversized swim bait. But normally if I'm using a lure that has a treble hook on it that is a 4/0 or less, I'm going to be using a medium to medium light action tip on there that I judge myself. I'm not looking at the rod to judge this for me. I'm looking at my own bend on it to judge it for me. Okay. Now, when you start to get into medium heavy and then heavy action rods, stiffer rods, that don't have the tip on it, that is when you're dealing with baits that you have to move a larger diameter hook or a larger lure through power into the fish's mouth. So therefore, let's say, for example, I'm fishing a bigger hook lure like my Blaukat Throwback jig here, or if I'm fishing maybe like a chatterbait or a 1/2 ounce or 3/4 ounce spinnerbait that has a 4 or 5/0 hook in there that's a little bit larger diameter. At that point, I have got to have a stiffer tip on there in order to generate enough power to penetrate that larger diameter hook and the barb into the fish's mouth. So therefore, if I'm fishing like a jig or any type of a single hook lure that's larger, I'm going to be using some type of a medium heavy to heavy action with that, especially if I'm fishing like a spinnerbait or a chatterbait or a bigger crankbait, something like that, medium heavy, or like a Texas rig worm would be a prime example. If I'm casting like a Texas rig worm on a 3/8 ounce slip sinker, like with a 3 or 4 aught hook. Medium heavy rod is going to be what I'm using with that. And then finally, the heavy action, or what I call extra heavy action, where it would be super stiff, where it doesn't bend much at all, that's going to be baits for my big baits. That's going to be my heavy duty flipping and pitching, maybe pitching and flipping a big jig on 25-pound line. It's going to be for something like this right here. You know, if I'm throwing some type of a really big swim bait, some type of extra heavy rod is going to be, you know, I'll need that for the power. Just your heavier baits that have bigger hooks in there, the need to move more line on a hook set through power. So that's how you determine it, guys, is learn to, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you go into, you know, a tackle store or something and you feel some rods, you know, just take a time to bend them like that. You know, you'll get a feel for it, because problem you have is if you go by what's on the rod manufacturer's listing right here, it's all over the board, because you may have one company that classifies a rod as a medium action rod, and the very next company that you go to that has the exact action rod may classify that as a medium light or a medium heavy. There's no standard form for that. Every company has a different way that they measure that, so you cannot go by that. And another thing that you can't go by is the suggested line size. Most rods have a suggested line size on there. Take that with a grain of salt, because most of the time the suggested line size that they put on a rod is way too broad. They'll put suggested line sizes like, you know, 10 to 25 pound test line, which basically covers most every line size. It's a lot more specific with that. And the line size that you use on any rod should be not dictated by the rod that you use, but it should be dictated by the lure that you're using. Because I've used light line on heavy action rods under certain situations, and sometimes, you know, I've used heavier lines on lighter action rods. So it all depends on a lot of different variables, but I know why they do that. They're trying to give people just some type of a foundational advice which to go by. But ultimately, you're going to have to do that on your own. And the more that you fish and the more that you use different type of rods, you know, the better that you're going to get with that. But you do need three types, guys. You need some type of a medium action rod that has a tip that's very, very bendable, that's very flexible, and you need one that's sort of a little bit stiffer, and then you need one that's really stiff. Once you have those three classifications of rods, it allows you to fish about every lure category that there is available to fishermen. So anyway, guys, hope it helps out. And like I said, if you guys are looking for some rods, guys, I'll put my Tackle Warehouse link in the description. Megabass, you know, I've been working with them forever. They have a great selection of rods. You know, they got them at all different price points. So I'll put that link in the description too if you guys are interested. Hope you guys are well. We'll talk later.